Hello, my name is William Smith, and I want to take the time to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about myself, my religious background, and my calling to the ministry and chaplaincy. And I'm currently a captain in the North Carolina Army National Guard, and I was raised in High Point, North Carolina. Of course, I was raised in the Church of Christ, and the individuals who play a role in the restoration of the New Testament church, which we know is the Church of Christ, were Thomas Campbell and Alexander Campbell, who were at the time called themselves the disciples of Christ, and then there was Barton W. Stone, who called themselves the Christian Church. And both groups held to an overall similar set of beliefs, which were that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, one, and then for two, that communion should be taken every Sunday or every first day of the week, and then three was the belief of adult baptism or those of the age of accountability should be through immersion in water as a necessary step towards salvation. These men also had a similar objective, which was to restore Christian unity through returning to the teachings of the early church in the New Testament. And we in the Church of Christ today hold to that same tradition where we continue steadfast in the apostles' doctrine, remaining in Christian unity by remaining steadfast in the teachings of the New Testament. In our faith tradition, we were all called to be disciples of Christ. And while growing up, I knew that it was my calling to be a minister at some point in my life. But I actually found it difficult to answer that call as a child, even in my teenage years. And this was because I had this fear of speaking publicly and was always concerned about what others would say about me. And for the longest, I fought to answer the call of the ministry and remain in my comfort level of not being the leader that Christ knew I could be. And then there came a point in my life when I decided that it was time for me to come out of my comfort zone, and I finally made the decision to answer that call to Christ in the year 2011. And taking on the responsibility of being an assistant minister at my local congregation in High Point, North Carolina, the minister there at the time, he bared a heavy load, and I wanted to assist in any way possible. And during that time, I began preaching on a regular basis and taking over the budget for the congregation. And I would later go on deploy to the country of Kuwait, where I would find a church home during that deployment. And during that deployment, I actually attended the Camp Arif John Church of Christ, where I would help in the ministry there also. And during my time at this congregation, I helped in preaching and teaching Bible classes. During my time in Kuwait, I actually finished my master's science degree in ministerial leadership and would return home to play a more active role in my home congregation. I started teaching more Bible classes and I started preaching on a more regular basis. And not only did I begin preaching at my home congregation, but I would also be asked to preach in congregations across North Carolina and South Carolina. Not only did I begin to preach and teach more often, but upon my return home, I began starting to counsel married couples from time to time. They would come to me and ask me to counsel them. Then going into 2013, I answered the call to be more active with the youth of our congregation and would be ordained as a youth minister. And during this time, I made it a point to start youth center programs to not only help them be more active in the congregation, but also to be more active in the community. I used my time as the assistant slash youth minister to determine whether or not I wanted to answer the call to become a full time pulpit minister. And during my time as youth minister, I decided to start my Master Divinity degree because I also felt the call to become a chaplain. And upon completing my study, I began applying for clinical pastoral education internships at various hospitals and applied for chaplain positions at several institutions. These positions are not all that easy to acquire. And at one point, I got somewhat discouraged and asked myself if this is something that I'm really called to do. And time went on, and I continued searching for chaplain positions when one day I searched on Indeed.com and I saw a position for an Air Force chaplain that I met all the qualifications for. This was very surprising and exciting because I always wanted to serve in the Air Force, but it never worked out for me. And upon seeing this, I immediately got into contact with the recruiter. And the recruiter then explained all documents that would be needed in the process. And while gathering the required information to start this application process, I decided to go on with my current career as a detention officer slash peer support officer. And shortly thereafter, I received an email from one of the CPE supervisors I had been in contact with, and she let me know that she was still interested in having me serve as an intern, and she wanted me to come in for an interview. And I would interview with her soon after this email was received, and she would later go on to hire me as a chaplain intern for the summer CPE 1 extended unit. Right then, I was more confident that this was my calling. I was very nervous when starting this program because I was only used to working with and counseling those I worked with in my congregation, and it was somewhat out of my comfort zone to minister to those outside my faith group. And I knew that stepping outside my comfort zone would only strengthen me in my ministry. And at the completion of this CPE 1, I was very convinced that the chaplaincy is my calling, as I learned that I could not only counsel those inside my faith group, but that I could very well be of good counsel to those who are outside of my faith tradition. And soon after graduating from CPE 1, I was actually informed by my endorser that they voted to endorse me as a chaplain for the active duty Air Force. And this was my confirmation that this is my true calling. And over the course of my lifetime, I've always fought for the goals that I have in life until I get to a point where I have run out of options or resources to achieve my goals. And it's always been a goal for as long as I can remember to help those in need. And to this day, I feel that I've achieved that goal working in the criminal justice system, being a peer supporter to those that I work with. Being a minister, I have helped and counseled many, and I also feel that this goal has been achieved by being a chaplain in a hospital setting, being that source of encouragement to those who are grieving and in need of counsel. And through working in the various fields just discussed, I do feel that I have prepared myself for this great ministry and feel that I am prepared to work in this ministry. I am extremely confident that if given the opportunity, I will make a meaningful contribution to the United States Air Force Chaplain Corps. I do hope, trust, and pray that I will be given this opportunity to take part in this amazing ministry that every Air Force chaplain recruiter I've had the opportunity to speak with has said that it is. I want to thank you for taking the time to learn more about me as a minister and my call to service. God bless and keep each and every one of you.